from the government. What would you at home like to see Jeremy Hunt announce come March the 6th? Is there anything that could turn around the fate of the Conservatives? Around 15 to 20 points now behind the Labour Party. It's not looking good for the Conservative government. If they announced wide-ranging tax cuts, would that change your mind if you've turned your back on the Conservatives? Or is there anything that they could announce that would change the fate for Rishi Sunak? At the moment, it's going to be a tough task. But at the moment, our tax burden, let's remember, at a 70-year high. Can they get it down? That was Olivia Utley, our GB News political correspondent. Let me know what you think. GBviews at gbnews.com. So, should Rishi Sunak cut taxes, and would it make much of a difference to the Tories' election chances? That is the question. I'm joined by Dr. Roger Gavolb, who's a former advisor to the Bank of England and the UK Treasury, so he knows his stuff. Roger, thank you very much for joining me. Good to see you as always. So we've got the announcement that the spring budget will now be on March the 6th, a little bit earlier than normal. We've got talk of a potential early election, although we don't know if the government will decide to hang on as long as possible before announcing that. And, of course, the papers full of ideas that the government are considering when it comes to tax cuts. What do you suspect will happen?
Well, I've been saying for a long time, Emily, a very, very long time, that despite all the protests that we can't have tax cuts, there will be tax cuts because these folks are really desperate. And these are the desperate, cynical actions of some people who are beyond unpopular. I think that Olivia is rather positive about the spin that they put out. I think she's right in using the words clever spin and clever tricks. And I think that the British public is sick and tired of seeing nothing but that from them. Cutting the inheritance tax is indeed a cynical move because it doesn't help that many people, although it's perceived as helping rather more. She's absolutely right, as I've been saying for a very, very long time. The only tax move that makes any sense to help us in this cost of living crisis is to move the tax threshold so that people don't suffer what's called fiscal drag. In other words, people on such low incomes that they don't pay tax now are dragged into the net, and people already paying tax pay more and more tax. You're quite right, Emily, that after the November, or after the last autumn statement, actually, when Jeremy Hunt, who nobody believes about anything, I think, and whose popularity rating is minus 15%, said these are the greatest tax cuts in a very long time. You're quite right. It actually was to have an effect of raising taxes to the highest level since 1948. I mean, it's ridiculous. These are desperate moves. I don't personally think it will save the Tories. I think we'll get Labour, who will probably leave the taxes where they are and introduce more measures that will further crash the housing and property market, and thus they will make property more accessible to first-time buyers because they'll become so much cheaper. Jordan Peterson, the noted analyst and psychologist, said the other day that if Labour gets in, Britain will become Venezuela for the next 20 years. He did say that, yeah. So I think it's moving the thresholds, which is the main thing. And I'm just afraid that nobody believes these folks anymore. They've lost so much credibility.
Well, Roger,
we will see what happens.
Roger, it's like you've snuck up behind me and read the inbox in front of me, because those are the two things that people are saying to me right now. One, don't trust the Conservatives anyway. And number two, they maybe will get my vote if they increase that tax threshold. And that seems to be the one that people want. But that is a lot more costly for the government, isn't it, Roger?
It is, but I think there are two things here. The first is what Bill Clinton said long ago. It's the economy, stupid. Because when you get to the voting booth, there's really only one thing people care about. It isn't immigration. It isn't Ukraine or Gaza or climate change. They care about how much money is in their pocket, Clinton said, how much the government is going to take in tax. Now, if they're smart, the Tories could save themselves possibly by some major cuts, starting with moving those thresholds. But it will cost them. And, you know, I've been saying also for a long time that all these huge tax increases by stealth have been to build up a war chest so they can make those cuts and surprise us all. But they've made so many mistakes, so many blunders, so many feet in the mouth, one after the other, that I don't actually know if it will save them.
You know, Roger, I'm in two minds about the importance of tax policy when it comes to where people put their cross at the ballot box, because I'm not sure, with the state of public services as they are and the narrative around the NHS being so negative, and also the reality of people's experiences, and then failures with the immigration system, I disagree with you. I do think people will vote on that topic, although perhaps not if they consider that both Labour and the Conservatives aren't competent enough to solve those issues either. But I do wonder whether people think about public service spending more than they do tax cuts. What do you think?
I think that I can see your point, but I do feel strongly about this. More than 20% of people with mortgages have seen their mortgages rise by over £1,000 a month. Now, if you took that £1,000 away, I think the focus would come off these other issues to a large extent. But the second point that I wanted to make is that this government is so foolish in the way it's conducted itself. Olivia and others have, without even thinking about it, really conflated the fall in inflation with the actions of the government. This government, Andrew Bailey at the Bank of England, Sunak, Hunt, they have nothing to do with inflation falling. I've been saying this for a year. We have non-consumer driven inflation. By raising interest rates 14 times, they have increased the inflation. This kind of inflation, cost-push inflation, falls by itself. They have prolonged the time when it's finally started to fall.
Yeah.
It's food and energy prices, not Hunt. Now, by allowing, even today, the Bank of England to keep interest rates where they are rather than reducing them, they are ruining the chances of everything they say they want to do. It's just stupid.
Yes, well, thank you very much indeed for your time, Roger Gavolb. And yes, you have been saying that for a long time. You've been saying it time and time again, but whether people are listening is another thing. Thank you very much, Dr. Roger Gavolb, who was a former advisor to the Bank of England and the UK Treasury. So he knows what he's talking about. Now, you could start your new year with £10,000. Now, you might need this if we don't get the tax cuts. So